I'm often asked what the best type of single column tie is. Ultimately, single column ties are just wraps with different knots holding them together. But which one should you pick? The truth is, each single column tie possesses a different quality. They have their strengths and they have their weaknesses. As you get more advanced, you may want to pick a single column tie that fits your situation. You don't strictly need to do this. We'll talk about alternatives to that later, but it might add a little something to your game. If you're brand new to rope, this video will probably give you a headache. If this is you, I'd suggest checking out one of the other single column tie videos and coming back to this down the line when you're more established with how to tie knots. However, for those of you who are already established in their tying, let's take a deep dive. Let's start with the big daddy, the bula bula. If you strip away the Japanese lore, this is just some wraps around the column with a reef knot holding them all together. That doesn't make it easy to learn, far from it. If you're from a sailing background, you can probably tie this in your sleep, but for the rest of us, not so simple. It takes time. You notice the bight is facing upwards and the working end is facing downwards. For this to make a knot, they have to change the way they're facing and then go over and under each other. That's what makes the knot work. And this produces a knot where the working end is now facing upwards, the opposite to where it was facing. And this is pretty strong when pulled in that direction, but it's pretty weak when pulled away from that direction. This is obviously a problem, but if we know about it, then we both know how the knot should be used and how to untie it really quickly. So because the working end is exiting at quite a shallow angle, it's perfect for building this tight arm binder on willow, where I don't want much space between the wraps. But does that mean that the reef knot is useless outside of these very specific directional circumstances? Not really, no. Let's retie the same knot and see how we can make it stronger. All I'm going to do is add another reef knot on top of the existing reef knot. So that means the bight stays on the same side of the cuff but just changes directions. And we can repeat this as many times as we want. If you look at how a lot of Naka style practitioners tie, a lot of them use reef knots, or square knots as they call it, but just add a ton of extra knots on top of it. Inevitably the first knot will collapse into a hitch, but the knot underneath will still be protected. So you probably already guessed this, but we can adjust the direction that the working end leaves the knot by changing the way in which we tie. So in this case, I tied with the bight going downwards initially, which has resulted in a working end which comes out going downwards. Similarly, I've been tying from left to right so far. If I tie from right to left, I introduce the possibility of two more variations. This time the variations exit from the left hand side of the cuff rather than the right hand side of the cuff. Just for completion's sake, here's the final option with the reef cuff. The rope emerging to the left and going towards us. So there are 4 variations of the reef knot cuff. How do we know when we're tying which variation we're going to get? If you want to be specific with your directional outcome, there are just 2 simple rules to follow. If you want the rope to exit to the left, tie the wraps to the left. If you want the rope to exit to the right, tie the wraps to the right. Just as easy to remember, if you want the working end to exit going away from you, start with the bite going away from you. In this case, the first time that the bite makes contact with the column, it is on top of the column and it is facing away from me. If you want the working end to exit coming towards you, start with the bite coming towards you. In this case, the bite comes underneath the column, and when it touches the top of the column, it's coming towards me. The shallow angle that you get from using a reef knot won't work for every situation. In this example, I'm tying the bottom of Willow's calf muscle and I want to go up to tie the top of the calf muscle. Because I need to travel perpendicular to the cuff, I can either reinforce a reef knot, which would make it slightly more bulky, or I can choose a different knot. Because a granny knot exits at a right angle, that makes it ideal for this job. So how do we tie a granny knot? Well, luckily it's very similar to tying a reef knot. In fact, people mistake them for each other all the time. So wrap around exactly the same way you would with a reef knot, and then go over and under with the bite exactly as you would with a reef knot. So the bite, rather than going over and under to the side it started on, is going to go around to the other side and then pulls into a knot. This means that the working end comes out at a right angle. Remember that this isn't as strong as a reef knot, so what I'm doing is tightening it down as much as possible to get the best results out of it. You saw before that I tied to the right, which meant that the working end emerged to the right. Here I'm tying to the left to show you that the working end will then emerge to the left. This gives us two handy variations for granny knots. One that goes left and one that goes right. Okay, let's take another scenario. Here I want to tie a cuff on Willow's ankle. I want it to be strong enough that it will take her weight in a partial suspension, but I just want to tie one knot so I can move on quickly. Which single column tie should I choose? The Somerville bowline is both incredibly strong and very quick to tie it if you know how. It's a shame it just has a couple of drawbacks that make it not appropriate for everything. The Somerville bowline is created by making some wraps, taking the working end underneath the bite in a loop, and then taking the bite over that working end and under and through the loop. I've covered this in a lot more detail in the Somerville bowline video, but for right now, worth observing how easily it comes apart and also how strong it is when it's being pulled up vertically, hence why I like using it as an ankle cuff during suspensions. A lot of people ask that if a Somerville bowline is so strong, why wouldn't you just use it for everything? And the problem is that Somerville bowline is great, but to tie it in a decent time, you need a gap between the rope and the person you're tying. Which is great, except if you want to tie things flush together, like for example I want Willow's thighs here to be tied tightly together, I can't do that whilst leaving a gap. There's two variations of the Somerville bowline. One where the working end comes out on the left, which weirdly you tie by making the wraps to the right, whereas if you want the working end to come out on the right, you have to tie the wraps to the left. Okay, let's look at another scenario. Here I want to tie Willow's forearms together and then go straight up in line with the cuff in order to go over her shoulder. To do that, I would like a knot which ideally comes out of the cuff in as straight a line as possible, so I can create these nice shapes. Let's have a look at the fast bowline. Okay, so now I'm moving on to the slightly weird cuffs because I'm coming underneath the column, wrapping around a few times, lifting up an untwisted loop, and then taking the bite over and under everything, and then back through the loop. Note that you have to pull the bite quite hard to the left whilst you're locking down, otherwise the knot collapses quite easily. In some cases there might be a fun struggle situation like there is here, in which case you might need a single column tie which is quick to put on and only requires just a very, very small amount of bite to make a cuff. So here I'm using the fast cuff. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about the construction of the cuff because we've done videos on it before, but you go through a lock's head with a loop and then put a twist on top of it. And then to release it, you just pinch the twist and pull. This tie is absolutely 100% not recommended for anything other than ground ties, because when this knot fails, it pings off. This is ideal for a struggle situation because it means the cuff is no longer on the person as soon as it fails. Just going to briefly talk about adding a quick release knot to a single column tie. Some people swear by this for safety reasons, but I'm not a big fan. Also, see the benefit of having something you can quickly get off. In many ways, I don't see the quick release knot as actually providing a much speedier exit from a cuff. So for example here, I just added a loop to my cuff, so that means that you can undo it by pulling on the quick release knot. But the problem with that is it still locks down on the arm. You still have work to do to get the cuff off. Let's check out the quick release knot on some other cuffs, because it works on a good few of them, including the Somerville bowline and the fast bowline. I would rather spend time understanding how a knot works and how to deconstruct it, so I can do that quicker in a situation rather than spend time mastering a quick release knot. Consider as well that this can be accidentally undone by other things, which can introduce more problems. And not to be glib, but I'd rather just have a pair of safety shears in my pocket than a quick release knot on the cuff. But if you really like your quick release knots and you found a way that works within your system, I'm not saying they're inherently a bad idea. I get why people use them. They're just not for me. Thank you for watching. My mission with this channel over the last 5 years is that I want to make rope bondage information as accessible as possible. I think Shibari is great, and I don't think there should be a financial barrier towards getting into it and having decent information. If you want to keep content like this coming, please consider joining our Patreon. From £1 a month, not only do you support our content, you also get extra videos, access to our Discord, and 75% of the love in my heart. In the meantime, check out this video about the blue harness.